lot to talk about, and I really want these folks to drive the conversation as much as we can. The president discharged from the hospital today, flown aboard Marine One back to the White House. At one point, he climbs the stairs, and he takes his mask off with other people who appeared to be somewhat nearby. Did you see it?
I would hope that the president, having gone through what he went through, and I'm glad he seems to be coming along pretty well, would communicate the right lesson to the American people. Masks matter. These masks, they matter. It matters. It saves lives. It prevents the spread of the disease. Social distancing. Instead of talking about what the only thing I heard was one of the tweets saying that, you know, don't be so concerned about all this, essentially. There's a lot to be concerned about. 210,000 people have died. You have, you know, about 1,000 people a day getting the coronavirus, 50,000 a week. I mean, so it's a great concern. I hope no one walks away with the message thinking that it is not a problem. It's a serious problem. It's an international pandemic, and we have 4% of the population and 20% of the deaths.
Were you surprised?
For the last 3 months, 3 times a week, I'm on the telephone and on Zoom with some of the leading immunologists in the nation, and they go through everything that's happening. And so the idea that COVID does not spread in proximity when you don't have a mask on, when you're not socially distancing, when there's large groups of people, when you're inside particularly, but even when you're outside, that's not surprising. And again, we keep forgetting, or we're not talking about it. 210,000 people have died already, and the expectation is if nothing changes, we're going to have another 200,000 dead by the end of the year. Forbid something happen to them, they don't have that access to that care. So it's...
You were socially distant, but hearing that he was infected, did you have a moment of pause, of worry, of concern for your own safety?
No, because, look, I've been fastidious about the social distancing. I've been fastidious about wearing a mask when I'm not socially distanced, and even then remaining socially distanced. And so we never got closer than you and I are right now, as well as when Melania came up on the stage, she smiled and waved. I waved to her, but it was the same distance. It was a little disconcerting to look out and see that his whole section, no one had masks on. While my wife was sitting further down, had a mask on, the people with us had masks on. I didn't quite get that.
You were able to see that from where you were?
Yes, when they came in, yes. Because I was standing backstage, and you could see people coming in, and a lot of people didn't have masks on. Go into every single detail precisely, and that's one of my buddies going out by that. But all kidding aside, so I think on balance, you have to tell the whole truth, what had happened, what was happening, and what's going on. But as moment to moment, I'm not sure that is an absolute requirement. But you cannot mislead about certain things, and I'm not saying they have. If, in fact, the president had, in fact, contracted the virus and knew it before he went on in the public, encounters and was not wearing a mask, that's a different thing.
A recent poll said 65% of Americans think the president bears some responsibility for contracting this virus. Do you agree?
Look, anybody who contracts the virus by essentially saying masks don't matter, social distancing doesn't matter, I think is responsible for what happens to them. If these people took off their masks, and they all have them on, I notice, and just all of a sudden got in a gaggle and started talking to one another, well, they're taking responsibility that, in fact, they should be held responsible for. Because every major scientist and doctor and immunologist has said that's a very dangerous thing to do. The particles and droplets can stay in the air for a long time, longer than they thought. It can go beyond 10 feet. There's all kinds of things they've learned and know. And look, I view wearing this mask not so much protecting me, but as a patriotic responsibility. All the tough guys say, I'm not wearing a mask, I'm not afraid. Well, be afraid for your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your neighbor, your coworker. That's who you're protecting having this mask on. And it should be viewed as a patriotic duty to protect those around you. As President of the United States, I would make a federal mandate on federal property, federal buildings. You must wear a mask, period, and you must be socially distanced, number one. Number two, I would make sure we move very rapidly to get testing available to everyone that's quickly available, so people can, in fact, be in a position where they can open their businesses, they can test their employees, test people coming in. I would make sure that we're in a situation, I don't know whether you have children. If you have children and they're out not in school, well, you have to make a tough decision, many people. Do I, excuse my back, I apologize. But do you, in fact, stay home and not be able to pay your rent because you have to take care of your child? What do you do? Those very difficult decisions. And so the way we know how to open schools safely, I laid out a plan all the way back in the beginning of the summer. We should provide them for the ventilation they need, by all the needs that they have for masks and social distancing and testing. For example, the president had committed, and FEMA had, the Emergency Management Organization, said we're going to give masks to teachers as well as to the students. And then the administration said, well, no, guess what? That's not a national emergency. Well, what in God's name is a national emergency if that's not a national emergency? So it costs money to deal with all of these things, and we should, in fact, be using the money passed by the Congress to see to it that people can open their businesses safely, be able to keep their employees on the payroll, making sure they can have the sanitation capacity and ability to sanitize their stores as well as their schools. All of those things we will do, and more. I know I'm going on too long, but there's a lot here that relates to what's totally within our wheelhouse.
Well, can I follow up with that a little bit?
Sure.
I heard you mention this idea of a national mandate.
Yes.
You've mentioned that before for masks, but what power does a president have to make that happen?
Beyond the federal property. I would go out and I would I would call all the governors to the White House. Some probably wouldn't come. And I'd call the governors and I'd say to the mayors as well as the county executives, take responsibility. Take responsibility and lay out the guidelines. Look, folks, one of the problems is this president said, I take no responsibility. Literally, it's not my responsibility. Well, if it's not his responsibility, he talked about this being like a time of war. We are under attack. As I said earlier, 200,000 plus have died. 50,000 a day are getting the virus. 1,000 a day thereabouts are dying. This is a national emergency. And so the president should take responsibility, and the federal government has an obligation to lay out basic guidelines, and the science matters. Listen to the scientists.